In today's video, I am going to be making a wood stock for an air gun, and this particular air gun is the Air Venturi Avenger. This is relatively new. However, it comes with a plastic stock. I am going to make a sporter style stock using walnut, and I have a blank right here. By the way, you can pick up these blanks either at a specialty lumber yard or even online. I have seen a few places that I Googled, and I've not tried them out, so I'm not going to endorse anybody or refer you there because I just don't know how they work, but I've seen that you can get these online as well. I have made stocks before in the past, and let me just disclose, I am not a professional. I'm not a master woodworker, not by any means. I am just a guy who likes working with wood. Anyone can do this. If you have worked on your own house or you've worked with lumber, you kind of have an idea. Maybe you've even sculpted. You can think of wood as a very hard clay, because what we're going to be doing is just basically a three-step process. And I've said this in my other video. I do have another video on this where I did the walnut stock for the ATI Nova Liberty. Let me show you. This is what I did the first time. This is the third one. This is the sporter style, and I'm going to replicate this today because I like this style very much. We're going to be doing this for the Avenger. The 3 steps to making your own walnut or wood stock for an air gun is, first you're going to inlet. That's getting the action inside of the stock, and that's doing this piece inside here. I think you can see that overhead here. The second step is going to be a rough cut of the outline. Now what I did was, and I'm hoping you can see, I'm going to tilt it so maybe you can see it a little better. I drew out the outline of the stock, and all I did was place this gun and its stock on top of the wood, did a rough outline, took some measurements, and I'll go over that in a little bit more detail, and I created a rough drawing. The most important is where the trigger, that's really respective to the top, where that trigger goes, okay? And then the last step is going to be sculpting the wood that, after you've done the rough outline, you're going to sculpt the fine parts of it. And I will take you through all the tools that are needed to do this, or at least how I do it. There are other ways. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say, and you may have your own tools, but I'll tell you what I use. I've now taken the action out of this plastic plastic stock, and this is the essence of the gun. Now we want to take this action as is. Now, again, this gun will not function without any part here missing. So this is what we want to put into this stock. When you're trying to get this action into the stock, you really have to observe it and take a look. And just from looking at it, and here, you can hopefully see this up above, it has a constant thickness throughout. Again, there's a little safety sticking out. There's a manometer gauge here on either side, and there's a bracket. But those can be sculpted later. When you notice that the entire length of the gun is about just over an inch, 1.03. It's a little thinner here at the trigger and this little piece, but that's insignificant. So when I looked at this action and I think about a straight line going across, which is going to be the stock, okay, it may dip down somewhere over here, but for the most part, it's going straight across. I see 3 sections. Here's one section, here's another section, and then here's another section with the air tube. And that's why you see them drawn out like this. Here, let me tilt it so hopefully you can see it up above and in front. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to carve a section here, a section here, and a section here. And we're going to go to a certain depth. But we're going to be using only one type of bit, and that's going to be this double flute straight bit. And with that bit, I'm pretty much going to go the entire length of this action to start the inletting. It's going to be a little more involved than that, but that is how it's going to start. So now that you have an idea of how we're going to get this action in here, what I will do is start to show you all the tools that I use. So the first and most important tool you're going to need is a router. and I would suggest getting a halfway decent one. This is a Bosch, and it's a pretty nice, it's not the best, but it is one of the better ones. It does come with a plunge. This is the plunge part, and then a fixed part to use. I believe I paid like maybe $300 for this. Tops, I think it was like 2 something. You can find them online. It's definitely worth getting. It doesn't have to be. I'll put this model in the description. I know I'm terrible about that, but I'll make sure I do it. And also, you're going to need a 1/2 inch double fluted straight bit. Okay, here, I'll let you see that there. Hopefully you're seeing that right there. Okay, and this one is from Freud. It is, I believe, 2 inches long. Here, let me open it up for you so you get a sense of what it looks like. Maybe it's 2.5 inches long, but you do need a long one, so about 2.5 inches. And the other one, and I did this with the Nova Liberty, is you're going to need what's called a core box cutter, and that's what you're seeing right here. This core box cutter, this one happens to be 1 inch, which is perfect for the tube, and this you'll use on the bottom to round out the tube when you're placing it in. Now, in order to complete the inletting, you're going to need a good set of chisels. They don't have to be expensive. Again, I bought these Buck Bros. I don't remember. This might even been at Harbor Freight. They're good enough. They work. They're sharp. And I'll show you how to sharpen your own. It's quite easy, holding at an angle, then rolling it. But again, you'll want 4 different sizes: 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1 inch. Once the inletting is done, you're going to want a jigsaw. I just have this very inexpensive Ryobi jigsaw with some good Bosch, bits, jigsaw bits. Now, when it comes to sculpting, you'll want to use this Carbide shaping disc. This can go on an angle grinder. Again, this is 24 grit. I believe it's 4.5 inches. And again, it's standard. It'll fit almost any angle grinder, and it'll chew away wood without destroying it because it's spinning really quick, even though it's very, very rough. But this is a great way to remove a lot of wood. You can get this at Harbor Freight. There are some specialty woodworking shops online that have really nice ones, but again, this was $10 and it works great. So another tool I use is this pro sanding roller I got from grizzly.com. I'll tell you, this thing is unbelievable. I really, really love it. It gives you a lot of control. You have different type of drum wheels that you put on, and you can sculpt away. Now, it creates a lot of dust. And by the way, let me just say this. If you're going to be doing this in your home, please be aware you are going to create so much dust. I'm actually going to be I'm in my garage. I'm going to be doing this outside because I have been cleaning up dust in this garage and in my house for about 6 months after it was done. So my advice is, if you're going to do it in a shop or do it outside. So this is a valuable tool. I believe this was about $200 or maybe about $200. Again, I'll put a link to this grizzly.com, this pro sanding roller machine. Last major tool that you'll need, at least you'll need some sort of this, is I use a rigid oscillating band sander. Here's a picture of it so you can see what it looks like. I actually have it up on my shelf. I'm not going to pull it down right now until I'm ready to use it. But that was invaluable. And again, the key is to keep this block in a square. Do not remove the edges, because when you're inletting, you need it to be square so that you're going straight down. When you cut it out, you want to keep it square, because when it comes time to take out, fine tune all these round edges, you're going to be using that oscillating spindle. Now, in order to keep your block, again, square and 90 degree, you need something to hold it, right? You're not going to do this on a table. There's something called a Moxie vise. Now, I'm going to show you my Moxie vise. I made this last year. There are plenty of videos out there on YouTube to fit, that's how I figured out how to make mine. So basically, I made a bench, very simple, all scrap wood. I did buy 3 pieces of 3/4 inch. I glued them together, as you see here. Let's see. Okay. And I cut a little edge, and there's 2 holes that accept a 3/4 inch pipe. I also bought 2 what's called pony vice grips. these little orange things, they attach to a pipe such as this, okay? And they just screw on. Here we go, let me show you. Nothing spectacular, this is very easy. I have, again, I think this is 3/4 inch, pipe. I don't think it's 3/4 inch. And it just screws in. This pony vise, which has another piece, I have it under the table. Here's a picture of that other piece under the table. And to put it together, just put your pipe in, screw this end in, okay? Nice and tight. You don't have to kill it, just good, tight. And cut off, if there's any threads on the other end of the pipe, cut it off because they should be smooth. And you'll have 2 of those. And let's put this together. So, hopefully I'm putting in the right way. Here's the top. I can tell the top because it's all chewed up. And you could take this off. This does not have to stay on your bench, although it doesn't hurt, but it will stick out a little bit and you may bump into it and you hurt yourself. So let's put them together. I'm going to put one first, start with one, put it through the hole. There is a hole in there, good. All right, we're going to let that dangle down. I think you can see it right here. Underneath, I'm pressing a little lever to get it in. There we go. That's one side in. Let's take, you're seeing it there, lift it up. Okay, let's put the other side in. And I have holes drilled in the table. Again, when you look up on YouTube how to do this, it's not that hard. Putting it in is harder. There we go. Actually, that wasn't too bad. Now you can slide this in, pressing on a lever, and you have what's known as a Moxie vise. So when you need to hold when you need to hold your blank in nice and tight, your Moxie vise will do that. This, I can lift the whole table, okay? This is not, I didn't even tighten it down that much. This is not going anywhere. Now, when you're using the Moxie vise, you may want to set it up in such a way that it's level, okay? Because it is important that your vise is level. So when you're using your router, this has to be level. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect because when your router is on top of it, it will be level. But just so you're not sliding back and forth. So like all the tools I've mentioned and this Moxie vise, once you put the time in and you spent the money, it's for life. You're gonna have these for the rest of your life. So I know sometimes it hurts to spend the money on tools, but I pretty much have tools that I use over and over again. These are tools that you don't just use for making a gun stock. Routers you'll use for anything, tables, edging, whatever it is you have to do, sanders, these are all tools, common tools that you'll use in other parts of your life. In addition to the router, you're gonna wanna have this deluxe router guide. This is the Bosch RA1054. Here you go, hopefully there you go, you're seeing it. This is very invaluable when you're trying to do your inletting. It will slide, make sure that your router doesn't go over the edge. In order to make working with this blank a little easier, I'm going to remove about 2 inches off the back and about 3 or 4 inches off the front here. After cutting these 2 pieces off, I'm going to wheel my Moxie bench outside and we'll start doing the inletting. So we've cut the end just right and the front with a little bit room for error. What I'm going to be doing is cutting the excess off of the bottom here because I need it to fit in the Moxie vise as low as possible. So if I stick it in the Moxie vise, as you can see, I think you can see right there, let's see, even if I dip it down, this is about 3 or 4 inches way too high. I need it to sit as low as possible because I'll be using some wood shims on this side so that I have a nice flat surface. So in order to have it sit lower, I am going to remove, you're seeing it there, remove this excess from the bottom, okay? So I'm now going to cut off the excess here using a jigsaw. I'm using some Bosch T308Bs. I'm just going to put that into my jigsaw here. Allow me to do now is to set that piece to set this block, still being square as I mentioned before, but allow me to set it into the Moxie vise. Here, let me show you what that looks like. So now I can set this into the Moxie vise with what appears to be maybe an inch of gap here, which allows me to work a lot flatter and a lot lower to the bench. This is going to be nice and easy to do. Now I'll put a little bit of like wood shim here along the side. We'll level it out so that I have a nice flat base and I don't rotate the router left and right, and it has a good level playing field. Starting to take some shape, but the most important and hardest part is this inletting. We're going to do that now. So we have our wheels here. I built this into the bench. It is just 2x6s, 2x4s, 4 wheels underneath. And what I do is I just put these 2 bars on here on the ends. So all I have to do is lift up and kick this forward. There we go. And that's it. I'm pretty much ready to go. I can wheel this bench outside. Wheel this outside. Nice and easy, one person job. So I've now set the blank into the Moxie vise at a height that I know works well for my shims here. I have 2 3/4 inch press wood that I'm going to screw down. Let's do that now. Okay, so I now have the blank level with this stabilizer board I have here. And what that'll allow me to do is pass the router and keep it straight. I'll have a guide on the left side and I'll be sliding back and forth. Start the inletting, and what I've done is I'm going to use I believe this is the 1/2 inch plunge cut, and we're going to use the least common denominator, which is 1 11/16. So I know I'm going to be able to go from here to here, 1 11/16, from here to here, 2.5 inches, and then from here to nearly the end, about 2 inches deep. This last part is only going to be the top barrel, so we're not going to worry the top barrel. So least common denominator among these 3 sections is 1 11/16, so that's how far we're going to go down. We'll take it in steps. We'll do 1 deep on one side, and then we'll do another deep on the other, because we want to keep that line straight. Remember to wear your protection at all times. Now I'm just going to use a chisel to separate this middle piece here. And here's why I use the wood. I have a lot more control. Good, we'll just break this away. This is just the center piece. So this was the center piece between the two, because it was 1.03 inches and this is ½ inch. Should be 0.03 inches. And now what we'll do is we'll just clear out the bottom, level it, and that is the first least common denominator all the way through 1 and 11/16. So I actually went to 1 3/4 because I always know that the wood swells. So I went a little, just a 16th deeper. So what I did was let's get in that camera, is do a first run from the back of the breech to about 3 inches before the end, 2 or 3 inches before the end, or where the second air tube on the bottom ends. I went that full distance at 1 3/4 inches depth using the plunge cutter in the bit, ½ inch plunge cutter. And I did 2 channels and then I knocked out the middle as you saw. Then the second part was to go 2.5 inches where the aluminum receiver is, and that's this section right here. I think you're seeing the camera there. And I went straight down again using the same ½ inch plunge cutter. And then at the back section here, after the block, from here to here, it's about 12 inches. That's the second air tube. I wanted to use the full 1-inch core box cutter, which is that round bottom. The problem was this is 2 inches down. My core box cutter doesn't have enough, the shank is not long enough. So basically what I did was I just improvised and I used the plunge cutter and I made steps on the inside to make it somewhat round. And hopefully you're seeing I got a light on it. And so what that does, that allows me to set the tube in, but still leave some meat around the inside. Then this last section here after the second tube, which supports actually just the air tube, the first air tube, the longer one, I did use the core box cutter, the 1 inch, and I went down on this section 1 inch, 1 full inch, which was perfect. And now remember, we're going to grind away the top, but that's for later on. At this point, I am now going to chisel out using chisels. Let's see, hopefully you see that there's a lot of imperfection here. The corners are very hard to do because I don't have a bit that can cut the corners. I believe they do make something like that, but they're meant for drill presses. I don't have a drill press. Again, I don't have a lot of expensive tools, so that's why I'm saying anybody can do this. I'm using, a router, a drill, all hand tools, chisels. So this should be doable for anyone. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to sharpen your chisels, because even when you buy brand new chisels, they're really not that sharp. They're okay, but they dull right away. So you really need to know how to do that, and I'll take you through that, and then we'll clean up all these parts in here that need to be squared off. So let's get to first sharpening our chisels. I'll show you how that's done. To sharpen your chisels, all you really need is a piece of granite that is very level and smooth. It could be something that you had left over from some work in your house, or even go to a granite shop and ask for, they have scraps, they'll sell you a piece of scrap, or maybe even give it to you, who knows. But that, you need a level piece of tile or granite, and then a piece of 1000, I use 1000 grit, I even have 1500 grit, but 1000 is good enough. Metal sandpaper, you can do it wet or dry. And take your chisels. If you'll notice, the chisels are beveled. They have a beveled tip here and a flat end. So what we're going to do is, you're going to take your chisel, hopefully you see it there, lay it flat against the bevel, okay, and pull it, okay. You can go forwards, but I generally just go backwards. As you can see, I have wrapped the paper around the tile so I can pull it. Let me stand up to do this. It's actually a lot easier. So what I'm going to do is hold it flat and pull. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this, hold it level with 2 hands, 1 hand in the front, make sure it's level, and go back and forth. Again, you want to make sure that this part here is flat to the surface. Again, you want to hold it very, very flat. There we go. So when I started just now, I had little, at the very end, I could see, right here at the end, I could see little cuts in it that were not even. And now it is very even. Let's see, I'll try to bring it to the camera. Hopefully you're seeing what that looks like. We have a very sharp edge. And you can see on the back too, you can see where it's missing some of the roughness, and at the very end it's polished. So you'll do that for each of your tools that you're going to use. All right, so at this point I'm going to start to clean up the inside of the inletting and then see how the receiver fits. Let's do this a little bit at a time. I've just sharpened my tools. They are very nicely sharp. Okay. So I'm now going to fit in the action minus the barrel band into here to see into the inletting, see how we're doing. And it looks good. What's holding it up right now is the safety that's catching up against the wood because it sticks out quite a bit. I would say about a 1/16 or a little bit more. Here I have to take away that part of the wood. You're seeing it right there. So this is the safety that sticks out, as you can see here, about a 1/16 of an inch. So what I'm going to do, I've already marked it. Let's put that aside. I've already marked it. Now I'm going to be using a Dremel with this extension, and I bought this little kit on Amazon. This is a saw kit. So it comes with, here, a whole bunch of saw blades, okay, which is really cool. And it comes with two, I believe this is 1/8 of an inch, and then 3mm for Dremel. So I'm going to try and use the smallest of the blades here, and we're going to put that on the Dremel. I've marked out, even on the inside, and you might be able to see that there, I marked out where I have to cut. And what I'm going to do is, using the Dremel tool, I'm going to get in there and make a line, a thin cut, and I'll do that on both sides, and then we'll chisel out what we need to chisel out. Let's see how this goes. Let's chisel out what we need to chisel away. I have finished the inletting with the chisels and cleaned it all out, and the action along with the air tubes fits right in place. Now what's stopping it from falling completely down, as you can see back here, we have about a 1/2 inch, are the manometers on either side. So I've marked off the manometers, and what we're going to be doing is using a sanding drum kit. This was purchased on Amazon. This is the Big Horn sanding drum set, as you can see there. And it's real simple, it just comes with 4 different size drums along with a bunch of sanders, tubes. So we'll take this one here, which I believe is about 1 inch, and it fits right over the manometer, which is really good. We'll set it in place. Let's put it in the drill. And what we're going to do is sand for the manometers. I'm going to try my best to be very steady and even. I'll do one side at a time. Let's start on this side here. It's a little tight. All right. So I've got the action in. It's a little bit tight, but it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna have to open it up just a little bit. As you can see here, if I try to, oh. All right, so it's a little tight. So I've nearly got it to fit. I did a little bit of cleaning up. It fits in really nice. Now it hasn't fallen all the way down because there is this little piece sticking out, the bleed valve sticking out. What I did was I raised the bleed, let's see here, the bleed valve nut a little bit, and I'm going to take a marker and apply some black ink to it, okay, nice and plentiful, and we're going to drop it down, and I want to see where it makes the mark. Okay, I now have a hole where I need to drill for the bleed. Now the bleed is 3/8 in diameter, so I'm going to go a little bigger and drill my little recess for the bleed hole. Let me close down the bleed hole. Wow, we're in. That's it. Here we have the beginnings of our, I don't want to cock it, I don't have the trigger attached. I now have to drill the trigger hole, but at this point, without the barrel band at the end over here, this fits in really very good. Just doing something, so I may go a little bit deeper on the gauge, one on one side, and one on this side. I'll just go a little bit deeper to give it some room to move. And we're looking pretty good. The other thing I'll do, I'll make a little bit of a cutout for the safety. So right now it's butt up against the top, but we'll shave that. So I've now completed the inletting, which includes the gaps for the manometers, the safety, the cutout for the 3-ring bracket, as well as the holes on the side. So let me show you how that fits into the stock here. We'll rest that up there. Take this, and here is the 3-ring bracket. And at this point, if you look, we have the bracket all the way in with a hole. Everything fits nice and snug. This here is down on the bottom. And something that surprised me, I actually was able to get the side screws that go into the bracket to actually fit on the first try. Look at this. So look at that. The screw fits on either side, perfect, and the stock is in place. Then we'll have one screw on the bottom that'll have to drill. This hole right here is for the bleed hole. I'll make another hole for the regulator so that we can adjust it. But for now, I'm pretty happy with the way it's working out. So the next part I'm going to be doing is the vent holes. I mean, this doesn't heat up, but we're going to put some vent holes for aesthetics. I have marked 6 1-inch vent holes, 7/8 of the way down from the top. Let you see that a little closer. So here it is a little closer, and you can see I've drawn a line coming across with 6 1-inch vent holes, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch plunge router bit, and that looks like this right here. Hopefully you're seeing that. Okay, and I'm going to plunge 6 holes on either side, and it's not going to interfere with the bracket and the screw that holds the bracket. So here it is on both sides. I'm now at the point where I've completed the inletting 100%. I've also accurately, which rarely happens for me, drilled out the 3 holes, one for the stock retainer, the other for the bleed, and the one closest to the muzzle for the adjustment to the regulator, and 3 different size holes, because the adjustment for the regulator can be really small. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that when you choose your stock for at least this Avenger, because it is all 1.03 inches in thickness, this stock is only 2 inches, which is actually very thin for a stock. They're usually 2 1/4 to 2 1/2. So you can get away with a thinner 2-inch stock. It'll be just fine for this Avenger. So the retaining screw on the bottom fits in perfectly. And now the reason it's not going down now is because this is the tip, how I got it to line up perfectly. Let me show you. Let me unscrew this. When I'm trying to drill the hole that retains the action in the stock, it's hard to figure out exactly where to place that hole. Let me show you what that looks like. So if you look in here, hopefully you're seeing some light through there. These 3 holes have to be done pretty accurately, otherwise the screw won't fit down. Now how I did that, I chose, there's 2 holes you can use, the one in the back here and then the one right here. Now the one in the back is going to end up by the trigger, so I don't want to put a hole in the stock by the trigger. I'm going to put a hole in the middle here, and all you need is 1 screw here and the 2, it's more than enough. This is not a 308 with a lot of recoil. This is an air gun. So what I did was I created, which is not a big deal, a nut with a point on it, and I screw that nut into the hole where I want my, let's see, I'll put it close to you, where I want my retaining screw for the stock to be. And I try to go down as far as I can, and you see it has a point. Hopefully you're seeing that. Okay, take it. Now while there's no holes in there, and it'll still fit in perfectly now, I put it in, and what I'll do is, making sure it's all the way to the back, I'll press it and press it. Now you can see that even with that screw with the point to identify where to drill, it fits in perfectly. Now I would hit it a little, just a gentle, to make a little mark on the bottom, and that will give me the exact spot on where to drill inside of the stock. And it just so happened that it worked out really well, and that is the last hole. Hopefully you're seeing that, the last hole towards the butt of the stock. Using that pointed screw should help you to identify where to drill. And I'm going to cut away 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I had a bandsaw, this would be very easy to do. I'm going to be doing it with a jigsaw. That's a little bit more difficult. And also, if you do it with a jigsaw, be careful that the blade stays, again, perfectly perpendicular to your plane, because what happens is sometimes when you're turning, you'll bend the blade and you'll get a curve, and you'll think you're far enough away when actually you weren't, you know, because it'll be on an angle. The cut will be on an angle. So make sure don't force it, let the blade do its work. The second part to step 2 of the sculpting. So this little tool is really quite amazing. So what it does, it's an oscillating band. So this band will rotate, along with, you can take this band off and use little spindles. Little, they're not small. It comes with 5 different sizes, 1/2, 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/2, and 2 inch. So I'll be using the 3/4 inch to do the trigger and finer little areas. This oscillating band sander is really awesome. One thing you want to do is you want to make sure that when you do tighten it down, this platform, because this platform does come down, it collapses, you want to make sure it is perfectly or as close to perfect as 90 degrees. So you want to use a square and make sure that it's not canted, okay? That's really important. But for now, let's get started on scrolling out these 4 sections and then using the oscillating sander. All right, so I'm going to start now to remove all of the 4 extra pieces we have. There it goes. Starting to become a stock. I have now completed the inletting and the scrolling, the general scrolling of this stock. It is still, as you can see, very square. You know, the bottom is very square. 3/8 bit, which is also a plunge cut, was used, and I'll let you see this here, for the trigger. So as you can see, if you look through the trigger, that is how I cut the trigger down. So this gun will fit in here absolutely nice and perfect. Very, very tight. Okay, let's see, you can see it here. Hopefully you're seeing the trigger coming through. All right, nice little fit. I mean, I don't want to tilt the gun over. I don't have any screws in it. But again, it is, oh yeah. So once I carve this gun, which is actually the sculpting, you know, the rounding out of the edges, to make it fit nice and comfortable in your hand. And then finally, the adjustable cheek riser will do that as well. I have also attached, at this point, the buttstock, at least the base part of it, because I'm going to ground and round this out with that aluminum piece on there, because you want it to fit, almost, you want it to look like it was sculpted into the wood. I'm going to use the rigid oscillating sander to round out the edges, and then I'll use the rolling sander, that's the hand tool I showed you earlier, to do the finer part. And then eventually I'll have to use a block of hardwood, you know, a piece of walnut that I have left over, and some sandpaper. I go very fine. I go to about 600 grit. I know some people only go to 320 or 400, but I really, really like to get it really fine. Then I'll raise the grain, you know, wetting it, drying it rapidly, raise the grain, fine sand it again, about 2 or 3 times, and then we'll finally polish it up. One other thing I want to talk to you about, or just let you know, when you're choosing your lumber. Now there's one thing, I got this relatively inexpensive. It was what was lying around, just over $100. And the reason is 2. There are 2 reasons. There is some sapwood on the top here. And I knew it was discolored, and I can tell, if you take a really close, maybe on this side you'll see a little better. But if you look at this top here, it's a little lighter. That's because that is the part that is towards the outside of the tree. So it's a younger wood, what they call sapwood, and is a lot softer. When you're inspecting your wood, again, depending on what kind of gun you're doing it for, if it's an air gun, low end, and you're kind of just experimenting, this is okay. But if you're doing it for a competition rifle, or you really want to try and do something really nice, make sure you check the wood for cracks, knots, sapwood, any, bending and warping. You want to make sure it was dried, whether it's kiln dried or this one was dried outdoors for like 15 years, at least that's what they stated. But the second thing is the alignment of the grain. The grain runs horizontal. That is not the ideal way, because having the grain run this way could force it to crack along this part here. What you really want is for the grain to be running vertical. Vertical this way towards the gun. This way it would not crack in this direction. And remember, it's not really going to crack. If I point the gun towards you here, the stock towards you, it's not going to break this way. It's very hard to do. Again, if the grain runs straight at us, back and forth here, there's very little chance of breaking. What you can do is drill a hole on an angle, a 3/8 hole, and it would be on this angle, and put a threaded 3/8 nut with some epoxy, and that you'll dip it down. It'll go about that, just like you're seeing here. That's how it would go towards the end and at this angle, and it would reinforce the handle where it's most likely to crack. Let's go on. Let's start sculpting this stock. All right, so what I want you to see is the use of the grinding disc on a angle grinder. And what we're gonna do is very careful. I'm not gonna do much of this because this is very thin so far, and it's also very delicate. So I'm just gonna use it to round some edges. And what this is really meant for is removing quite a bit of meat from the wood. And I'll do that down here. I have another camera off showing some more detail. We'll probably grind out here where we need to take a little bit more meat away. All right, so that's it for the angle grinder. So as you can see, it really grinds away a lot. So what we're going to move on to now is using the Pro Sand roller. This is from Grizzly. This is a great little product here. Sort of like a grinder. I rarely use it with the protective guard here. Let's get rid of that. And I still have a rolling bit on there. And this little tool is awesome for grinding angles. And this is going to allow you a lot of control. This is a T25942 from Grizzly. Again, inexpensive, I believe around 200 bucks, and definitely worth every penny. One thing I recommend you guys get are extra drums, both I believe these are the 2-inch, and here is the tapered 1-inch. I have about 3 of those, along with extra sandpaper that fit over. Here is a flat one. Here, let me show you. Just comes out. This is an old one. Chuck that away, and we'll use a new one here. Okay, 2-inch out. Take your rubber here, and now it goes only one way. You can see you can squeeze it, so in the counterclockwise direction. Get it in there. Again, spin it and squeeze. And there you are, just press it down. right. So you can see how this is now taking shape on the top. A little bit lopsided, but we'll keep fixing it. The back. And that grinder is excellent, especially in this little delicate area up here. You don't want to use anything very, very harsh. You want to take it slow. I'm now at the point where I have almost completely finished sculpting the stock here. Mostly rounded out, the edges are smooth, any dents are taken out. You'll notice I've had the stock in my Moxie vise here, and I clamp it down pretty tight. You hear that stretching. Now that's okay because I'm using walnut wood against pine. Pine is much softer and won't leave any marks in the wood, even if you tighten it down quite a bit. So it allows me to work better here on the table. I think you're done. Make sure you fit it in, rock it back and forth, make sure, screw it in. Now I have 2 screw holes on either side here that allow for the clamping of the front. And in the back, I have, so this is the air, let's see, what is that? So this is the bleed hole, this is the regulator hole, and the last hole here is the nut that's going to hold down the action inside the stock. Now, as you can see, it is looking pretty good, at least I think. Again, you always want to feel, now I don't have the rubber piece back here yet, that's still on the table, so it's going to be a little forward, but my length of pull is 13.5 inches from the trigger to the rubber butt, to an inch past here. And even at this point, so if I move it a little forward, I can feel, it feels really nice. And again, I like to keep my thumb up top, but this feels really good. You always want to continue feeling it. So rest your hand and see how the grip feels. On this particular one, I left a little bump here so that my fingers can wrap around. I just like that feeling better rather than the 3 individual finger grips or I guess slots. The final part to remove any gouges or any waviness in the wood, you're gonna have to use just a piece of wood, flat, with a sandpaper. I have 2. This is a smaller one. This is very coarse. This is 80 or 60 grit. And this one here is about 120 grit. And that is long. What you want to do is when you have it, now I'll lock it down in the vise, in the Moxie vise here, okay? And for this portion here, you really want long strokes, really long and straight strokes. Because if you try to do short, what you're gonna do is you're gonna have waves in the wood. And what you really don't want that to happen. It's gonna show over the long distance. The same thing, now when you're doing the front, be careful. Obviously, there's less wood inside here at the foregrip. So when you lock it in, make sure you lock it in where there's some thickness, some bite. So you can really bite down on the wood without cracking it. And the same thing on the back, whether you're, long strokes, always long strokes. So this way you remove any of that waviness. The final sanding part, I'm using 200 and 400. No, this is 320. And just by hand, again, always long strokes, but you'll allow your hand can contour the wood so that, you really create some nice smooth, especially in here. It's very difficult in this part here. You have no choice but to wrap it around, wrap the sandpaper around your hand and kind of, just go with the contour. And again, I'm kind of done. I'm not really removing anything there, but that will allow you to get those really nice contours in the difficult areas where, your thumb grip is here. Now what I want to do is actually put on the adjustable cheek rest here. I want to cut this piece right here, and this is the hardware. Again, this hardware can be gotten on eBay or Amazon. They're pretty much available. I think I got it from Europe somewhere. Someone in Europe is making these relatively inexpensive, and they're damn good quality. You get 2 bars, a tightening nut, and some good stainless steel screws here. And so what we're going to do now is measure the depth. Probably going to go down about 1.25 inches, cut a straight line, and then come up. and we're going to do that using a hand scroll saw. Let's get to that part now. So now I'm going to determine where to place the hardware and where to make my cut. So what I'm going to do is place this down here with the screw and just kind of look at the maximum. I mean, you could take a measurement of it. It's about 1 inch, but I know generally I'm going to be about 1.25 inches down. So I'm just going to make a little mark here. All right, that's my first mark, just to give me an idea of what kind of depth I need to do. Now I'm using a flat piece of wood here. I'm using the sanding board. Keep it perpendicular. It's got to be right up against it. 1 5/8 inches. So we're going to go down 1 5/8 inches. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to make another line back here. Okay, I'm going to double check. You know, measure twice, cut once. So 1 5/8 inches. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Let's flip it over. Put this in about center. Let's go down 1 5/8 inches. I'm going to go straight across. Okay. And do the same thing on the other side. Okay. Now we have to determine at what point do we want the cut to go up. And I'm going to do it from the back. I'm going to do it from the end of the butt. And I'm going to determine that to be about 1.5 inches. Then turn it over. Do the same thing. So let's see. Maybe you can't see it there. So I have a mark here and a mark here. This is the point where I'm going to start to make my way up. And then what we'll do is we'll make one more mark in the back, and then we'll connect the lines. There I have half of it, and hopefully you're seeing that. Okay, let me bring it close to the camera here. So there's the mark, and there's a line to the halfway point. Now I'll do the same thing on this side. A reference mark for where to come up. Okay, so now I know at this point I will start to scroll upwards. Now I'm just going to take a quick measurement just to double check that everything makes sense. 1 5/8 inches, 1 5/8 inches, 1 5/8 inches, and one. Now I'm looking straight down because I want to make sure, again, just that it's roughly that I've got it right. Okay, so now I have a mark that I can clearly see all around, so I know where to cut. Okay, so I'm now going to cut the cheek piece here so that I can put the hardware on. And I'm just going to be using a simple scroll saw. This would be a lot easier if you had a bandsaw. You can just pass this through really straight because it's still flush. But again, I don't have one, so I'm using what I have. Joe, I always think of you when I'm about to cut these, and I say, please don't let me mess it up. Oh, well, here we go. Let's do it. So I have a little mark. You know what? I'm going to put some glasses on so I can see what the hell I'm doing. And I have a little mark to start. And before I make the first cut, I'm going to make sure I am okay. See how we're doing. Looks like we're doing okay. Good. Okay, take it slow, take a look. Good. Making sure I'm staying on the lines. All right, again, a little wavy. This would be better done with a bandsaw, but it's pretty flat. Little sanding will flatten it out. I've cut the block off and gave it a good shiny sanding. And of course, what that does is it misaligns because you made a cut, you know, it's not going to be exactly perfect. So once we put this piece of hardware on, here you see right there, what we're going to do is sand it even. So let's not worry about that for now. Now let's worry about putting the hardware on. It's 2 pieces. Okay, I'm going to take off this screw here. This is the tightening, let's see, take off this screw right here. This is a tightening screw. And what we're going to do is I've already drawn out, as you can see here, I'm going to put it on the outside of the stock. I'm a right-handed, so the screw adjustment's going to be on the outside. It only goes one way. As you can see, the screws drop in. Here, you can see it right there. They kind of drop in only one way. So this is the top. The screw comes in from this side. And what I've done is to outline center where the bottom goes. And then I'm going to route out about a 1/2 inch down. Let's see, is that correct? Just a little less, maybe 3/8, just a little more than 3/8. 7/16, something like that. And that'll countersink it. So then what we'll do is we'll put the top piece that goes inside of here. Okay, you can see that there. And how we'll do it is, once this is in place, we'll put this down, put a piece of double sticky tape, attach it, and then I'll know where to draw out and router. So let's start with the bottom piece first. Now I have set the stock into the Moxie vise on my table, and it's very important that because I'm going to run the router along the top here, you don't want it to be skewed forward or backward. You want it level. So what I'm doing is, and you'll be able to see here in this camera, if I put it on the table here, I can see that it's the table. Now the floor is not level here, or the table's not level, but it's sort of shifted just gently to its level, but shifted to the left. If I put it on there, shifted just, so this is so now I know the wood where I'm going to router and this surface are at the same plane. So now I can easily router, make sure this is nice and tight, and router down about 3/8 of an inch. I now have the router set up with a, I believe this is a 1/2 inch plunge bit, straight bit, and we're going to make one lane, then make a second lane. So I'm just stopping because you always want to make sure that you're cutting correctly, and don't move the router until it has stopped, because remember, you could damage the tip, either end of the stock if you move it while it's rotating. So I'm just looking at it and looks okay. All right, let's continue on. Now let's test the fit. Let's see how it is. A little, again, a little loose. I didn't do it perfect, but that's okay. That's why you have screws to hold it down. The piece, this bottom bracket is about 3/8, and I went about 1/4 of an inch down, 1/2 an inch down. So the reason you want to go 1/2 an inch down is because you have this hole right here with the screw that's going to stick out the side of the stock. And you want to make sure that it's down a little deeper so that you have some wood on top of the nut, because you do have to drill out what appears to be about a 1/4 inch hole for this nut here. That's this right here, okay? So you do want to countersink this a little lower. So now that that's done, we're gonna put this in place. We're gonna drill the 2 deep holes for this, for the adjustment up and down. Next thing you're gonna wanna do is drill they're a little bit bigger than 3. It's actually, I have a 25/64 bit that fits right down there because you want it a little bit bigger so that it has some movement to move freely inside of the stock, these 2 bars. I think 13/32 might be too thick. Yeah, I mean, you could even, you know what? I'll probably go to 13/32. Since I have the bit, I'll go to that size, but we'll do it in steps. So we're gonna open them up with a 13/32 bit. This was a 25/64 with, of course, I have a depth indicator, how far not to go. Hopefully the final piece we'll need. Gonna try to stay center. So now let's see if we can send it down. It's a little bit, it's not quite. So we need to open it up a little bit more. Now I've got the bottom piece in place and drilled. I'm gonna put the top one on with a popsicle stick on the top. I don't want to send it all the way down because then I can't get it back up. And the plan is to use double-sided tape. We're going to stick this in place as best we can. I'm going to try to keep it flush to the front. And then pull it up and make the outline on the bottom of this so I can router out this piece into the top of the cheek rest. So let's try that now. Let's put some tape. Okay. Okay. So I have some double-sided tape on there. And you can see it here. Let me zoom in a little more. So you can see the double-sided tape. Now I'm going to carefully place this, and I'm using the front as my gauge. Okay, and I'm looking down over it to see that it's pretty straight. Okay. That looks good. All right. All around, let me just see. Good. Okay, now I seem to have it in place. And we'll pull it up. There we go. So I don't, because if I try to pull it from the, even though it's sticking with doubles, it's not that strong. So we're using this to pull it up. There we go. And there it is, sticking in place. We don't want to move it too much. We want to make sure it doesn't move out of place. And now I'm going to draw. Now I have it, there we go. And now you can see how I'm going to route it out. And now I know it's going to fit straight. Perfect. This is a perfect fit. It's countersunk, which is good, and barely any movement. That's real. That's a really good router. Every once in a while I get it good, but that was good. Okay. Make our little pilot holes. Remember, be careful not to go too far that you go through to the other side. Very firm. All right, we didn't go through the other side. There you have it. Okay, so I have finished putting the equipment on. I just have to make a hole on this side for the adjustment screw, the tightening screw. But at this point it's on, and you'll notice, here I'll show you in this camera, there's a gap, okay? So right here at the front, it's touching. So I'm gonna sand down the front just a little bit. We're gonna sink it down, and then we're going to reshape this so that it meets perfectly. And we'll resand the back of the entire stock to make it all look seamless. Now what I have to do is drill the hole for the tightening nut. That's this one here, okay? And I did it off camera. I was just kind of going with it. But basically how I measured it was the depth that I sunk it down, which was 1/8 or 2/16, plus half of the width of the bottom bracket would give me the center of the hole from the top. So that was 3/16 plus 2/16 or 1/8 gave me 5/16. I measured down 5/16 from the top. I made a little mark, and sure enough, how cool is this? So I tried it out, goes all the way in. So I know I hit the hole perfectly. So now what I'm going to do is remove it so that I can drill the bigger hole, because remember, you have to fit this end hole here, which is 3/8. Roughly have to make a 3/8 inch hole. 5/16? 5/16 might do it. Okay. And there you go. We got a perfect fit. 11/30 seconds. As you can see, I think you see it there. It's going all the way through. So let's put this in place. Good. All right. So it fits in place. We can screw it down. And that is the bottom bracket. I've now finished sculpting this stock. And I've even gone so far as to sand it down to about 400 grit. Again, I spent a lot of time really getting out every little fine, scrape mark or cut mark that you'll see from the original sanding. And if you can see it with your eye, like if you see a little bit of what looks like a gouge or a dig, you really have to get that out, because if you don't, it's going to show up in the end. So I've spent about a full day sanding with 400 grit. By hand, just, I'm not pressing hard, unless you have to get the gouge out, then you'll press a little harder, and long strokes, hold it between your hand and just long strokes. But at this point, I was just kind of gently, going with the contours. And again, I find just take, your 2 fingers, wrap the paper around it, go gentle. It's a little tedious, but again, it gets done. So I'm at this point. We're going to use a technique to raise the grain that has been compressed from all the sanding. Even though it feels pretty smooth, it can be smoother because all those fibers are pressed down. What's going to happen is when you wet it and then heat it rapidly, and we're going to use a heat gun. This is an old heat gun I've had like from the 80s, but it still works. And we're going to wet it, dry it rapidly, and then sand it really lightly. And we'll maybe do that twice to raise the grain and get rid of that rough feeling. So let's get to it. Now, I generally use shop towels, as I find they're the most lint-free and work best. So we're gonna wet the shop towel. I have a bowl here with water, and we're gonna soak this. And this is also gonna help get rid of any of the sawdust that we have lying around. So let's get it nice and wet. I'm gonna put this aside because we're dealing with electricity, and water and electricity don't go together. So let's soak this down. And you can see all that dust coming up. Now, I'm not too concerned at this point with keeping it wet just yet. I have this stock on a 2x3 that I screwed down through the retaining hole, so it's not going anywhere. Just like last time when I did this, you can feel, it feels like dry skin, and it's really rough. I mean, you can't hear it, but on my fingertips, the hole is popped up. So what we're gonna do now is very lightly, we're gonna sand it with some 400, and I'm just gonna do this gently. We're not gonna press it really hard, and we'll do this a second time just to make sure we've raised up the grain nicely. So I'm just gonna go, and you should always go in the direction of the grain. All right, so that is the first raising of the grain. I still feel some spots here and here. You really gotta rub your hand over it, and if you feel a spot where it feels rough, you really gotta go over it. You gotta make it smooth. Now that I've raised the grain twice and made this very, very smooth, what we're gonna do now is clean this down with some spirits. Not this spirit, but mineral spirits. And we're gonna just wipe the whole thing down, and then we'll use a diluted solution of true oil and mineral spirits, probably 1-to-1, and sand that down to get all those little fibers filled in with the sand, with the wood itself. So that'll make it even smoother. So let's get right to that. All right. Wow. And this kind of gives you an idea of the depth of the grain. You can kind of see how it's going to look when it's almost complete. Okay, so we now have it pretty clean. And what I'm going to do now is just mix a little bit of true oil and equal part of mineral spirits. Okay. I'm going to use a little less than half of a rag. Get this really saturated. Okay, there it is. Now what we'll do is we'll put this on nice and thick. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is remove the hardware. So at this point I have removed the hardware from the cheek piece here, so that I can work on the underside as well. And yes, I should have done that the first time, but we're going to still do 2 more layers of the diluted true oil with mineral spirits. I'm going to let this dry for about an hour or 2. It is kind of relatively warm and the humidity is low, so this will dry relatively quickly. So I've let it dry for about an hour. What we're going to do now is, because that was such a thin coat, I'm going to hit it with some 000 steel wool. I'm going to use a glove because I always get that steel wool stuck in me somehow. So it's a good idea to use a little rubber glove. Again, you want to have your work area very clean and free of dust. So we're going to do another half and half mixture of true oil to mineral spirits. Actually, I think this time I'll use a little bit more mineral spirit, a little bit more true oil. Okay, now I'll let this sit for 2 hours because this is the first really soaking coat. It'll soak in. Then I'll hit it with some steel wool and do one more layer of this diluted. Now, again, to get it to look satin and not have that gloss look, I'm really going to need to dilute the true oil, because once you start applying true oil in its full strength, maybe the first layer might appear a little bit satiny, but once you get to the second and third layer, it starts to turn glossy. So you have to decide at what point you think the gun is protected enough and has the look you're going for, whether that's a satin look like it is now, or whether it's more of a glossy look like my original Nova Liberties were, really shiny. I mean, again, it's just a preference. There is no right and wrong. So now off camera, I have applied 3 coats, and this has now a satin finish. This is pretty dry. I did buff it, I sand, so it's going to be a little rough, but this gives you a sense of the finish. Let's see, a little closer. Okay. And so I have a decision to make whether I want to keep this satin or start to go gloss. So since I can't make up my mind, it's late at night on the one day that I've been doing this, I'm going to apply this is the 4th coat of diluted. I'm going to do 1-to-1, one more coat, true oil to mineral spirits, and apply that and see how it looks in the morning. And if I like the way it looks in a satin finish, maybe I'll apply 1 or 2 more diluted coats, because that's pretty much how I've been keeping it satin, just by diluting it. But once you start to apply full true oil, its full potency with your finger, you're going to start to get glossy. So let's try to do this one more satin finish and we'll see how it looks in the morning. I think that looks pretty good. That is the 4th coat. And I'm just gonna let it sit here, dry overnight. In the morning, I'll take a look and see if I like the satin finish. Maybe I like it, maybe a little semi-gloss. Maybe I'm gonna go for the semi-gloss look, we'll see. So of course I couldn't wait till the morning. It's kind of middle of the night here. It kind of isn't how I want it to look, so I'm not into the semi-gloss look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet sand this, and we're going to go with a high gloss. So I'm going to apply the full strength true oil using my finger as an applicator, just so I don't contaminate the whole bottle. Just you don't really need that much. Yeah, I'm gonna use less rather than more. I can always add to it. So just make sure you have clean, dry hands, and with your thumb, with your index finger, just start applying it. And as I've said before in the past, in my first video, only do the pass once, and as soon as it starts to get tacky, that's it, move on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is start from the center, and then I'm going to use a screw to hold it in place and apply the true oil in a thin but liberal manner. So that is the first application. We'll let it sit and dry overnight. I'll come back to it tomorrow and wet sand it, do this all over again. Off camera, I've applied 4 new layers, full strength layers to the stock, and it is nearly complete. However, one tip I want to give you is that I'm looking, you know, I always look at it in the light, and if you're still seeing the grain showing through, I mean, I like a candy coating on it, a really shiny candy coating, and I'm looking at it, it still needs one more coat, so I'm going to apply this last coat. I'm going to wet sand it, apply a last coat, put all the hardware back, and we're done. Again, here's your applicator, your finger, very thin coats, and again, this is not a difficult project to do. Just patience and take your time. By the way, one thing I haven't mentioned is, you notice I keep putting it back on this stick here. What I do is I place it here to dry and try to make it not touch any of the outside part. It's kind of touching over here, but again, it's a hidden part, so you don't really see it. Just makes it easy to work on and a place to dry. It's very secure. You know, you'd hate to have your stock fall on the floor and damage it and have to start all over again. So always have some kind of you know, internal wood holding device. This is what I find works for me best. So I'm now going to sand with 1000 grit paper. You'll notice I've taken off that fleece sweater. You really don't want to use any kind of, you want to make sure your area is clean and that the clothes you're wearing don't give off any kind of dust because that's going to end up on the finish. So let me do this wet sanding here. And again, very light sanding with the 1000 grit. Okay, let's get this last coat of True Oil on there. And you'll need less and less, you know, every coat you put on, it could be thinner and thinner. So hopefully that is the last coat. We'll let it dry and we should be done.